I'll call it a big win because I don't know how many the Giants are going to get this season. Over the Cleveland Browns, 21-15, and I think the defensive line was a big reason why. And I do think we need to be honest and talk about how the Cleveland Browns offensive line is struggling right now as a whole, going through some injuries and just not good play along that offensive line. But we'll start with the positive and what we're talking about and focusing on here. Giants defensive line, the pass rush win percentage for their big four, the guys who played the most on that defensive line. Defensive tackle Elijah Chapman. He had the highest pass rush win rate because he probably had the most one-on-one opportunities when you got guys like Kavon Tibido, Dexter Lawrence, and Brian Burns also on the defensive line. But shout out to Elijah Chapman, 27.8% pass rush win percentage. Brian Burns had a 15.2. Dexter Lawrence had a 15.0. And then Kavon Tibido had an 11.1. Ollie, when you watch the Giants defensive line, what'd you think of this group and how they played?
Yeah, unbelievable. The speed off the ball is just absurd. And I know DeJuan Jones, who we may get into, is a heavy-footed fellow at the best of times anyway. But Brian Burns beating him out of his stance was just outrageous. Yeah. As good as any player is, you could survive some of those reps absolutely if you're a better player, if you're more twitchy anyway. But they're just somewhere. It's like he knew the snap count, and he's out of the, it's before the ball's even in Watson's hands. He's around the corner. He's in the backfield. So he was on fire. Lawrence, obviously one of the best, if not the best, interior players in the league. And the way they use Chapman is really interesting. You know, he's a guy, I think, who throughout the year is going to have these massive swings of having impactful weeks and then just, you know, nothing happening the next week. But the fact they have him as the fourth guy and the skill set being just pure torque, undersized, fire off the ball, get across the face of someone, create disruption, force someone to panic to have to help, and then everyone else who's flying into the space you've created are the three best players, hopefully, on our defense, the way we've built this thing. So they just have a really, really good group. I think the skills overlay really well. They've been pretty poor for most of the year. Burns was poor in week one. Thibodeau was a non-factor in week one.
Yeah.
But they got the best interior defensive guy in the league, and they at least have, for whatever you think of Burns and Thibodeau particularly, they do have speed off the snap with the three other pieces. So your best player can do everything for you right in the middle of the line of scrimmage, and everyone else is so explosive that I think no matter how good the line is, you are going to get some weeks where it's just too overwhelming. Everything happens too fast. Quarterback panics, and you just start racking up the pressures and the sacks.
Yeah, and I think that it all starts with Dexter Lawrence, you mentioned, and I don't know this for sure, but I believe the Giants probably went into this year saying, hey, we got Brian Burns on one side, we got Kavon Tibido on the other. One of those guys is going to be able to win on one-on-one. We think they are talented enough to do that, especially because of the attention that Dexter Lawrence commands in the middle. And again, I'm not sure if this is the case, but I feel like it could be. I feel as though in week one, the Giants might have entered the season thinking we can get Burns and Thibodeau those one-on-one, straight-up one-on-one opportunities because of what the presence that Dexter Lawrence is in the middle. And even with that being the case, the pass rush win percentages for both of those guys was low through the first 2 weeks. And what I noticed the most about rewatching the Giants defensive line film from this past weekend is the utilization and success that they had on stunts. So getting even their talented fast pass rushers unique opportunities to be loopers on a stunt and be able to attack one shoulder with full speed or whatever it was. And I felt like they had a lot of success doing that. There was a specific play where, you know, they were executing a pirate stunt, which, you know, if you think of what a common stunt is, it is you have a crashing player and you have a looping player, right? The idea is the crashing player takes both of the blockers that are right in front of them, and then the looping player is taking a little bit more time to get there, but he should be free, or at least if one of the offensive linemen is able to break off of the crashing player, they're doing so trying to recover, and you're probably able to at least like attack the outside shoulder with a lot of speed when you're coming around the edge for a guy like Kavon Tibido or Brian Burns. And with a pirate stunt, you're doing that with two crashers, and then you have a looper coming over the top. So I noticed that they ran an interior pirate stunt with, I believe it was Chapman and Dexter Lawrence, who were both slanting to one direction, and then Kavon Tibido was coming screaming around the edge. And I saw that I don't think that ended in a sack or anything like that, but you're getting to Watson very, very quickly at that point because of the athleticism that you talked about with those edge rushers. I don't necessarily know what to call like this 3-man weave stunt. Maybe it's just a stunt addition, but I remember seeing a play where Lawrence was the crasher, Thibodeau was coming around the end, but then also you had like Jason Pinnock coming around the end on the other side too. So it was almost like a double looper type of a stunt that was more of a like timed or layered stunt where different guys could have come in and attacked the pocket. So the creativity in which Shane Bowen, their defensive coordinator, displayed this weekend with the defensive line, I was very encouraged by, because these guys weren't really able to win one-on-one like they thought they maybe could have going into the season. When I'm talking about Burns and Thibodeau, that pass rush win percentage for both of those guys was lower than what you wanted it to be. It was lower than what you paid Brian Burns to be, and it was lower than what you drafted Kavon Tibido to be. So instead of banging your head against the wall and simply saying, nope, these guys got to play better, I think they were willing to go to more creative and advantageous situations with their speed. And like you mentioned, it helps when DeJuan Jones was just no matchup at all for Brian Burns on that right/left side of the line of scrimmage. I mean, he could not protect his outside shoulder against Burns. He was too quick for him. So that was just basically going to be a win every time the ball was snapped. But on the other side and throughout the line of scrimmage, I thought they did a really good job of keeping these guys free and maximizing that speed, utilizing a lot of those stunts. So I like the creativity that they were able to show as well.
Yeah, certainly. And, I've said this to you before, like when you just see like raw blitz rate, pressure rate, it's often meaningless to me. I want to know like what was the intent of the blitz and the pressure? Like show me what was the target plan, what was their plan, and how did they adjust throughout the game? And Bowen's plan was, if you look at the stuff they ran, you mentioned the loopers and the twists and some of the pressures they ran, they were screaming it into the middle of the line of scrimmage. That's what they wanted to do. And that is a telltale sign of DC saying, I don't respect this quarterback will climb up through the pocket. He's just not going to do it. He's either going to bail or he's going to panic. He will not take kind of the first step and then try and rip out, right, climb through the pocket and try and go. That's why you want it all kind of coming, as you said, layered around and swooping into the face. And he was correct in that. I will say, like, the Browns have had this now for all 3 weeks. Ken Dorsey had this issue in Buffalo as well. And I don't know if it's him setting this stuff, line coaches. I'm not sure how their building operates with this stuff. Their protection plans are just abysmal, like every week. They get caught out with stuff consistently. They rarely adjust. And Bowen, for as inventive and cool as some of the stuff he ran, a lot of that like true blitz stuff was like as basic as it could ever get, which was, we will open the game. We're going to blitz away from the back. Most basic pressure you can run at any level of football. Look at where the back is. Send a guy in off the edge, opposite to the back. You take the end guy, you crash inside the shoulder of the tackle, and you hope that the back panics and you get a free runner on the outside, right? And the line is left with a choice in their protection rules. What do we want to do? Either you let the end crash inside and the back picks him up and screens him, right? Not ideal. The NFL doesn't do that. They take most dangerous, right? The tackle takes that guy, you squeeze the edge, you let the back come across. That's how almost all NFL teams operate. So they blitz away from the back, and they are getting in every single time. The backs have no idea where they're scanning or looking, and it's just free season on Watson. Then they make an adjustment in the third quarter. They run this thing like 4 or 5 times. It hits every time, right? Or Watson gets rid of the ball in a daze. In the third quarter, they make an adjustment to say, cool, we'll start scanning out there. That would maybe be helpful. And so Bowen just says, all right, now I'll just blitz the back. So the back is now moving across from the side, across Watson to go and pick up where he thinks the pressure's coming from, and it's coming back from where he was before. That is not complex stuff. And I get they were rolling through so many linemen, right? They had injuries all over the place. They had injuries during the game. They were getting wrecked up front with one of the best players in football, and Lawrence. They got the 2 fast guys screaming off the edge and looping back inside. It's a lot of moving pieces. I get that. But just running the most basic protection stuff of we squeeze everything inside, we let the widest rushes come, is like day one college football stuff, let alone, stuff in the pros. And they still cannot get this stuff right. And they get caught out with it every single week. So there was definitely like major credit to the players. I just thought they were so gassed up. They were flying around. It was fun to see Thibodeau like play at that kind of speed. And to see him, as you mentioned, in a place where what are his best traits? Well, balance is like right up there. So having him curve around where he can maintain his speed and momentum all the way through running on an arc, which is not easy for a lot of these people. That's really impressive stuff. But there was as much blame, I think, on just the protection plan, the individual players for the Browns, as it being like a really, really necessarily great plan from Bowen and the Giants.
Yeah, and you know, with Thibodeau, it's been something where I went back, and I think we talked about this maybe for our first episode when we did it in the trenches. I know we talked about it in the review show when I was disappointed in how the Giants' defensive line was playing to start the season. And I said, you know, I went back and I watched, not that sacks are everything, but I went and I watched Thibodeau's 11.5 sacks last year. And, you know, some of them, they're effort, they're cleanup sacks, right? But there's some other reps in there where you go, okay, like, I see why you were drafted where you were. Like, I see that from you. And even watching this game against the Browns, on the reps that Kavon doesn't win, he at least shows a little bit of something. Like, he shows some hand speed. He's just not getting there or winning quickly enough to be impactful right now at the NFL level. And so it's so hard for me to quit Kavon Tibido. For as much as that pass rush win percentage has been lower than I've wanted it to be, he hasn't exactly been the individual one-on-one winner that you have just wanted him to be at his draft status. It's hard for me to quit him. So it was nice to see him and Burns really be able to utilize that speed this past week, even if, like you said, it was maybe more of a Cleveland Browns failure, to at least see that if you fail as an offensive lineman, Thibodeau does have that speed and recognition and that deployment from what we saw this past week to be able to get in there and continue to win and be disruptive. I at least was continued to be encouraged by that. So I'm not ready to sort of like give up on Thibodeau yet. I see some flashes from him, but you mentioned what Brian Burns was able to do and sort of what Chapman was able to do as well. And I thought it was a good week for the New York Giants. And I thought that we needed to give them some praise because, again, I don't know how often we will be able to do that.
I mean, that four-man group, that the skills make so much sense together. It is bizarre. Yes. They have not been more impactful right away. They should be, if not an elite group, at least in terms of like when you get into the measurables, like if the team's not winning games, tough down and distances on the field a lot, do they get gas? We should be able to at least go, well, through the first two quarters, if you look at the pressure rate, they're actually really good. Like that's where they should be at, just based on the skills. They all just overlap and weave together nicely with the two speed burners, one more balance, one more straight dip and rip. You get the wrecking ball inside. You've got now a juiced up guy playing inside. I feel like they can run whatever they want, right? They can just go 4 down and go, we'll outspeed you, someone will crush you inside, or we can start doing more of the fancy loop stuff. And these guys are so quick off the perimeter. Them looping around is different than having one of the heavier ends loop around. Like it's a different world to live in, trying to get out to those guys. So that should be there. And so at least we got to that, as you said, it shows that when a team is not at the level, when the talent isn't there or the protection plan is off, they can punish you, not just to like a decent level, to a 40 pressure, 10 sack level, which is what this group should be able to do.
Yeah, and I mean, you throw Azeez Ojulari in there as well. I know he had some good reps too, and it's like you said, on paper, the reason why I think we were so disappointed in how the Giants defensive line started the season is because we know what it can be. We saw some glimpses of that. This is still one of the, when you talk about four-man fronts, like this is one of the highest potential four-man fronts that we do have in the NFL. So it was nice to see them play very well.